This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. One question that a lot of Browns fans ask that I think is super valid is, what is the Browns' plan for the future? Like, yeah, it's cool that they have all of this money that they're spending. Yeah, it's cool that they're in a position to win a lot of games. But what does this mean for the future? Is the Watson contract going to weigh the Browns down for the future? Or is any number of moves, contracts, or things that they're involved with, could those be the downfall of the Cleveland Browns? So what I wanted to do today was talk about what is, now that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have re-signed, the new 5-year plan for the Cleveland Browns. There's a couple timeline splits here. If this happens, then this goes down. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. So the timeline for 2024, right, and this is where the 5-year plan is starting, is pretty straightforward. In 2024, the Cleveland Browns plan to compete. It's pretty clear. Pretty obvious. They plan to compete. They plan to try to win a Super Bowl over this year and next year. So the next 2 years, pretty simple. They keep the core that they have, maybe add 1 or 2 players to that core or swap out 1 or 2 players to that core. But the core is the core, and you're going to run it back and try to win a Super Bowl with the core of players that you have now: Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, etc. Right? Like this main core of players. So that's the Browns' plans for 2024-25 and 2025-26. Now, once you get to the 2026 offseason, there's the first split in the timeline. Timeline A is the version of the Browns' timeline in the 5-year plan that exists if Watson plays well over the next 2 years. Timeline B is the timeline of events that exist if Watson does not play well. And when I say play well, I mean, does Watson earn another lengthy extension from the Cleveland Browns? The reason this matters is because an extension can push a lot of money down the line for the Cleveland Browns. It can push cap hits from this contract into 7 years down the line. And if you know the game that the Browns play, where they move money down the line because it's less expensive to pay that money that you owe this year in 2030. Think of it as a credit card with reverse interest is what the Browns are doing with their cap situation. Since the salary cap always rises 7%, think of that as the reverse interest, right? So imagine you had a credit card with negative 7% interest, which meant the more you put off paying it, the less the amount on that card goes. You would put a lot on that card and kick it down the road in order to kind of reap the benefits of it. That's what the Browns are planning to do with the salary cap. So if Watson does earn a contract extension, a lengthy one, like another 5-year deal, that means that money from 2026 in 2027 will be pushed pretty much all the way to like 2032 or 2033. By then, the salary cap will be like $400 million, and the whatever they owe Deshaun Watson at the end of that will be nothing. He will probably retire at the end of that contract, and then they'll do something like Big Ben where he signs a 10-day contract, and then you split the contract into 2. The best case scenario for the Cleveland Browns in the current contract, the one with the least amount of hiccups, the one with the least amount of rebuilding, is the version that exists where you get Deshaun Watson on this contract and another contract, and you get to build around Deshaun Watson for the next 7 years. That is the best version of events. In this timeline, in 2026, you would extend Deshaun Watson. That means that money owed in 2026 is going to get pushed all the way to 2032 and beyond. You would also, that free agency, reload big. You would trade some of the older players or let some of the older players walk. We're talking like Joe Bitonio, right? Guys who are in their 30 now. This is probably when you would say goodbye to Amari Cooper. We'll see where Nick Chubb is at this timeline, but the Browns are going to want to get younger players in their prime via trades and free agency. They're going to do their first swap out, right? And this is where Andrew Berry's going to be tested as a general manager. Can you keep the boat going while changing in and out some few names? Miles will still probably be here. Denzel will still probably be here. Jerry Jeudy, if he plays well, will be here, right? Like some of the guys who are younger or in their prime right now, they will be here through this timeline. But some of the more supporting names on the Browns roster right now will be moved on from and kind of swapped out for younger players. We're talking like Amari Cooper, maybe David Njoku. We'll see where he lands there. Maybe even a Denzel Ward gets swapped out for somebody else, so on and so forth. So that'd be 2026. You will be rebuilding. You would be adding a lot of free agents. You would be trading for a lot of guys. You'll be trying to get younger. And you'll try to be a championship contending team again in 2026. 2027, you're going to try to win a championship again in 2028. So in this 5 years, you would have two windows, right? 2024, 25. So those 2 seasons, and then another window in 2026 to 2027. If you get two legitimate championship windows, as with Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, and you make one Super Bowl, or if you make a couple AFC conference championship games, the contract will be probably worth it. So that is the original plan. You're going to have 4 seasons in 5 years where you're going to be trying to win a Super Bowl. 1 season where you're going to be a contending team, but maybe not the best version of yourself. But 2 seasons for sure where you're going to have a really good shot to win a Super Bowl if you play your cards right. So that is the first timeline with the Cleveland Browns. That is the timeline where everything goes right for the Browns. Deshaun Watson earns a second contract. All things are good and all things are great. Now let's go to the timeline, because this is the one that people are worried about. Timeline B, where Watson does not earn an extension. Does that burn the franchise? Not really, right? You're not going to have as many swings at a championship window. You're definitely going to have to do some small rebuilding, but I don't think it's going to destroy you in the sense that the team moving to Baltimore destroyed the team. Like, I don't think you're going to be in another 20 years of destituteness. It'll be like 1 or 2 down years. And pretty much if they plan it right, it should only be 1 down year if this happens. So timeline B, you would let 2026 kind of play out. You wouldn't really do a big free agency run in 2026. You wouldn't really sign a bunch of guys. You might let some guys walk a little bit, but it's not going to be like you're not trying to compete. It's just going to be obvious that you're not trying to build the best roster you can possibly build given your cap circumstances for that year. So you will be in that kind of a situation. Watson will probably be the starter and play out the remainder of this deal. Now, another thing to think about, right? In the 2024 of this timeline and the 2025 of this timeline, the Browns are going to keep an eye on who's available in the 2025 draft. They're going to keep an eye on who's available in the 2026 draft. And I mean quarterbacks. So they're going to keep an eye on the quarterback position for those 2 years. And they're going to keep an eye on the quarterback position in 2026 draft and 2027 draft. The Browns, if they don't love where they're going with Watson, or maybe even if they do love where they're going with Watson, might consider still drafting a quarterback to develop behind Watson to eventually take over, similar to what teams that have been able to go from franchise quarterback to franchise quarterback have done. The best one is the Green Bay Packers, who have always had a franchise quarterback. And even like the Cincinnati Bengals, who went from Carson Palmer to Andy Dalton to Joe Burrow, right? You always draft the next guy. So that's going to be something that's going to be in the background of every timeline, no matter if Deshaun Watson plays well or not. The Browns are always going to look at quarterbacks. They're going to see if they like one. If they like one enough in the first round, they will probably take them if they think they are one of the better players in their draft. So 2026, you rebuild. You let Watson's deal expire. You let the season kind of be whatever the season is. You're not expressly tanking or trying to lose. You might be a playoff team, but the ceiling on that 2026 team will not be a championship caliber team if Watson is not in a situation where you obviously want to give him an extension, right? So you're not going to do what you would do in the other timeline if Watson was an extension worthy guy, where you throw in all this money and you try to get as much possible out that season. This, you will let his deal expire. You will eat his cap hit so it doesn't hang in and linger in from longer, especially if he's not going to be on the team. And you would get younger. You might do a little bit of free agency, but you're not going to do a crazy free agency. You're basically just kind of letting time expire on that Watson contract for 2026. Now, 2027, Watson will be off the team, and you would either start a quarterback that you drafted recently to be the next franchise guy, DTR, or somebody that you draft in the 2027 draft. That's who would start in 2027. And if that quarterback shows promise in 2027, you would then go forward with that quarterback and rebuild and then try to win a championship with that quarterback starting with their second year. So we're talking about in 5 years, you would have 3 seasons where you're really trying to compete and win a championship versus the 4 that you would have if Watson stays healthy and plays well. So those are the 2 timelines. Now, this timeline splits into like when you find a quarterback, right? Like if you find that quarterback already with DTR, if he's like the next franchise guy, I doubt it. But if that's the situation, then the timeline obviously moves up and it's more seamless. If you have to wait, obviously it pushes it further back on there. But I imagine if this looks like it's going in a direction where Deshaun Watson does not seem like he's going to be the franchise quarterback for this team going past 2026, the Browns will be aggressive with their options in acquiring a suitable quarterback for the next few years that they feel like they can win with. One of the big differences from when, if the Browns end up in a situation where they don't have a starting quarterback, which they haven't really been in a spot where the starter wasn't obvious since 2018, they end up in a situation like that, they're probably in a better spot to land on their feet because they have an actual organization now. I will always contend the biggest reason why the Browns had 20 different starting quarterbacks and so many different eras in the early part of their expansion history is not because the Browns or the city of Cleveland was incapable of finding a quarterback. It was because the Browns were consistently changing out general managers and coaches. So you would have a quarterback be drafted for Butch Davis's vision. 3 years later, Butch Davis gets fired. You bring in another coach, and now that quarterback doesn't fit that coach's vision. So that quarterback is not being used in the right way. And then that quarterback is not successful. Part of developing players is keeping a consistent environment around them. And if the Browns are able to draft the quarterback that they have a vision for, it's not going to take as much for a quarterback to play well in that kind of system. And I think they'll have an easier time finding a quarterback. It's not going to be easy, but it will be easier than it was for past Browns regimes, given that they have a legitimate organization behind them now with Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, Dee Podesta, and the Haslams. Like there's consistency, there's continuity. They know what they're looking for. They know what they want out the quarterback position. They know what traits they want to look for. There's a lot of experience in that scouting department. All of those things will make it easier to find a franchise quarterback. So even in the worst case scenario, I think the Browns, if this Watson thing does not work out, will pretty much be ready to bounce back by 2027, by 2028. They're still going to have 2 years of contending, whether Watson is great or just okay, right? These next couple of years, because I think this team proved last year that they don't really need that much from the quarterback position to be successful. If Watson plays well, they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. Watson last year, with how he played, was able to elevate the Browns to a legitimate Super Bowl contender after the Baltimore Ravens game. It's just not going to take that much with this specific team to get to that level. So they're going to compete the next couple of years, hopefully for a Super Bowl. And I think that's given. But after that, after 2026, it's a matter of, hey, is Watson playing at a high level? If he is, you'll be back by 2026. If not, never really go through a lull period. If not, you'll probably eat the 1 year in 2026, maybe another year in 2027, be back by 2028. But it's not going to destroy the franchise, right, if it doesn't work out. So that's the 5-year plan. I wanted to give you guys both versions of it because I think both versions are on the table. I think Deshaun Watson played much better than a lot of people give him credit for in 2023, but there's no guarantees for him coming into this season. And whether you are a Watson fan or a Watson hater, I think we all are at the points where you want to see Watson produce consistently for this team over a 17-game season or close to a 17-game season. But that's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.